Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So this article is about education secretary wants to allow the accused to cross-examine victims who have been treated bad in cases, say, like sexual misconduct on the job. And so she basically wants the person who's being accused, that is actually the perpetrator, to cross-examine victims, the victim, or the victim that he's done whatever type of act with. And so here it has it Betsy DeVos, who is the education secretary of New College Plan, allows alleged sexual, actually this one is actually saying it allows alleged sexual offenders to demand proof from their victims. Now, just from hearing that, what do you think about that? And so it goes on to say that this woman here, Betsy DeVos, and this is out of Yahoo Lifestyle, Eloise Soleil wrote this article. Her name is Betsy DeVos, and she's preparing a new guideline as we speak for how schools should handle sexual offenses. Okay, so the Education Secretary, Betsy DeVos, is introducing new measures to changes, allow people who have are accused of sexual misconduct to cross-examine their victims and request evidence. So basically, the person has to request evidence. The person that's being accused they have the rights in her book to request evidence. I don't think this is fair, and it isn't right. I believe those things should happen, but not the one that's being accused. It shouldn't be the one asking for evidence, and that should come from whoever's representing that person that's accused. Like if it was like a counselor, a lawyer, or something like that, but not the actual person who's accused. I don't think it doesn't even seem like it's a safe situation that it would make the person, like, who knows, what if the person was attacked, or they were beaten, or they were extremely traumatized by that perpetrator or the suspect, and you're asking that suspect to cross-examine the person that they've just abused or they've hurt, or they tried to end their life, or whatever they did, beat them to death, or almost were closely as if they almost would have died. Why would you ask them to do that? That's my question. I just don't think it makes sense. But according to the New York Times, which obtained the proposed rules last fall, DeVos rescinded 2011 letter prepared by Obama administration, which detailed how schools receive federal funding should handle sexual crimes. So the truth is that the system established by the prior administration has failed too many students, DeVos said in September 2017. Survivor victims of a lack of due process and campus administrators have all told me that the current approach does a disservice to everyone involved. It sounds like, from what I've heard from some of these situations, is that a lot of times women don't want to come forward, or victims rather. I mean, it doesn't just necessarily have to be women. It could be kids. It could be, older people. It could be, males. Victims of sexual abuse are, trauma. A lot of times don't want to come forward And so they can't really get people to come forward because they're afraid of how they're going to look, if they're going to be ostracized or made fun of or treated even worse, or their situation's not going to be taken serious. Or people will look at it in a sexist view. A lot of times that's what I've heard with these type of situations. People are afraid of their suspect, whoever it is that could have committed the crime. They're afraid, so they won't move forward. And so, as the Times reports, DeVos, her rules would maintain much of which is under the law of title. It has IX. And I believe it's Title 11. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not a Roman numeral reader. A federal civil rights law which protects students from the sex and gender discrimination, along with sexual misconduct. However, there are notable changes. So here is what DeVos's rules are entailed. So a greater burden of proof. Instead of the school following the preponderance of evidence standards, meaning victims only need to prove that a crime occurred, more than likely not, the evidence that the schools use to determine a ruling would be held to a higher standard. Increased rights for the accused. Schools would continue to use mediation to make informal decisions. And let's see. Hold on one second. Okay, so, oh, sorry about that. From one screen to another. No, one second. So schools will continue to use mediation to make informal decisions and practice that former President Barack Obama guidelines discourage to avoid intimidating the victim. Okay. That's what I'm saying. So, the only thing too I think is really bad is having the person that actually did the crime do the intimidating, which they call it cross-examination, which I call it's intimidating. And it says allow the accused to request evidence from the alleged victims and cross-examine them, which really I call it intimidating the victim. Let's say the person that attacked that person nearly beat their brains out, or threatened their family, or threatened that if they tell that they would come for them again. And so now you want this person who's the accuser, the one that's being accused, to cross-examine the person they beat the heck out of? I just don't think that doesn't sound right. So anyway, a narrower definition of sexual harassment. Obama's guidelines define the crime more broadly as unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature. It includes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal, nonverbal, physical conduct of a sexual nature. But Betsy DeVos' plan to specify the definition as unwelcome conduct on the basis of sex that is so severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive that it denies a person's access to school education program or activity. As the Times reports, unlike Obama's guideline, DeVos proposed rules to not clarify what a hostile environment is for victims, but would allow schools to bar a person from entering campus after a safety and risk assessment. A lesser burden for the school to investigate the complaint. Under DeVos rules, schools would be legally responsible to investigate formal complaints only if the school officials had actual knowledge of the crime. A formal complaint is one made to an official who has the authority to institute corrective measures. Additionally, schools would be responsible only for pursuing crimes that occurred on campus and during school programs versus those that occurred off-campus housing. Wow. According to Obama guidelines, reports to Time, schools were required to deal with complaints no matter where they occurred, which I think was much better because even though it's maybe it, you know, it could be right across the street from the school campus. Let's say somebody's getting in their car, they're leaving, and they're parked away from the campus, and somebody could run out up on them then. And so what do you do with a situation like that? And what she's saying that you're on your own, basically. The option for schools to provide supportive measures to students who don't want to file written complaints with the goal of keeping kids in school, the institutions would be able to provide disciplinary individualized services, and those that are non-punitive, time-limited, and narrowly tailored. Examples: counseling, campus escorts, and changes in housing. The presumption of innocence for accused parties. According to the Times, the administration explicitly says that just as an institution's treatment of a complaint could constitute sex discrimination, so would the treatment of the accused. Education Department, a spokesperson, Liz Hill, told the Times that the department was in the midst of deliberative process, and the Times reporting is premature and speculative, and therefore we have no comment. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, one in 5 women is sexually assaulted while in college, and more than 90% of sexual assault victims on college campus don't report crimes. Exactly. They don't report crimes because they're afraid that their attackers are going to come. Sometimes they'll threaten them that they'll come for them again. Sometimes because of all of the stigma around, being labeled, that you're snitching or whatever, or the whole thing, like you get made fun of as if you're the bad person for telling on a person who's done something wrong or done something bad to you. Or you fear retaliation, especially if they're in a position of power. If the attacker is in a position of power, let's say, what if the attacker was a professor on campus or was part of the staff and they sexually, showed misconduct towards a college student. And so what do you do in the event of that? And so you want that person who maybe he or she's had a history of sexual misconduct on the job. They, if you want this grade for this class, you have to, give me this sexual favors. There are professors that have done things like that. What do you do in the event that happens? There could be a bunch of people that could come forward, but they're afraid because maybe they're afraid that they now have to tell on this person, but the reason why they passed that class was because they had to sleep with that individual, or they felt desperate to sleep with that individual. Who knows what kind of situation is going on? So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I just think that this is not a good idea, but she's changing a lot of things. She's not the only one. It seems like everybody that goes into this administrative office under Trump administration, they change everything that has to do with the former administration. They take it away. It doesn't matter what it is, even if it's beneficial to others. They just want to dismantle all of it. And when they do this, their new plans that they put in place don't seem like they're really good plans at all. They seem like they're very problematic, and that it would leave room for perpetrators and suspects to be more aggressive, and possibly, even have something else to go on to threaten their victims with. Well, if you tell on me, I'll get to cross-examine you, and you gotta show proof that I did something to you. That's like saying, to R. Kelly, that you've done all these things to these women. You get the chance to get in court and cross-examine each one of your victims. They have to bring proof forward that you sexually did what you did to them. So they have to bring doctor's notes that they got diseases. They have to show some kind of proof. What if they keep them somewhere, in a place, maybe if not physically, but, and in his case, women were kept in a place where they couldn't speak and they couldn't go anywhere. So they had sex slaves. But what about in the event that the person is mentally afraid to come out and they feel trapped? And so there may be a psychological thing that person is doing to them that causes them to feel trapped, like they can't speak out. And so therefore it looks like they're stumbling their fear. And so what do you think that's going to create when you allow the accused to cross-examine their victims? Well, that's the way I see it. I just think it's a horrible idea. But that's not unusual for this woman here. She's basically been dismantling and been coming up with some crazy laws. She even, just the past week, she came up with a law where she wanted to arm teachers with guns. What a bad mistake. That is the worst idea. Among other of her ideas, her plans are really, really not really well thought out. But anyway, with that being said, I'll let this video go. But this woman, she really is creating a lot of problems. The way it's looking, it's not looking good at all. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to let this video go. Thanks for listening.